I'm Chris McDonough, a retired homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. So, Dr. Ramsland, what can you share with us in relationship to where we should take this train this evening?
Well, I've spoken with the Missouri investigators. I've spoken with the Osage County investigators. I know the DA that was going after Rader, and she shared her files with me. I've seen a lot of the law enforcement stuff. My sense of where we are today with the potential new cases attached to Rader is that we have an impasse. We have people making claims about ambiguous items of interest that can be interpreted in more than one way. I know Dennis Rader has his interpretation, and the sheriff of Osage County has his interpretation. And I side with the DA. Let's see evidence. That the only way to break an impasse where these items do have multiple interpretations is get the evidence, get the items tested to see if they actually are evidence, instead of calling them evidence before you've tested them.
Let's talk for probably the biggest case that they're trying to, connect is the Cynthia Kinney case in Oklahoma, the 16-year-old cheerleader. She worked at her uncle's laundromat in Oklahoma. She was last seen at the laundromat. Her purse and drink were found there along with a half-eaten donut. Okay? From an investigative aspect, me looking through the window, and Greg chime in here, the homicide number 101 is you always look for the last place the victim was seen and the last person to have seen them. And then you can engineer that case through a victimology back into the life of that potential victim. And so one of the things that I am intrigued with is the faded beige 1965 Plymouth with two people inside that pulled up, and Cynthia was seen getting into that car. Have you had any conversation with Dennis about that? And is there any type of vehicle like that in his circle of influence?
I guess there could be vehicles that might have some similarity, but he did not actually work with other people. So she was seen with two people. Some reports say two women, some reports say a man and woman, but he didn't operate with another person at all. And he just now told me he hasn't, if he ever had been through that town, it was not during that time, and it was in passing. Wasn't really, he didn't notice really anything. He didn't stop there. He didn't stay there. So that's what he has to say about it.
So you had a conversation with him today?
I did. I've had a number of conversations with him about these things, because each time a piece of the puzzle, let's say, is put on display in the media, I go to Rader, because I want to know. I mean, some of the things are in the book. For example, there is a a small piece that keeps getting shown about 17th Street and a laundromat and his eyes on the brunette and bad wash day. So bad wash day could be bad wash day for the victim. It could be bad wash day for him because he didn't succeed. Could be either one. I know that he lived on 17th Street in Wichita for a time in the 1960s. He claims that's the laundromat he's talking about. So there we have another explanation for an ambiguous thing that he wrote. Who's to say? I mean, who's to say he's wrong? I know it's in the book. It's been in the book since when I wrote it in there in 2014. He lived on 17th Street. That's right there. What can I say? He said he doesn't even know this town. And I know that there's some connection. He loves threes and, triangles and whatnot. So there is a triangular building nearby. I asked him, have you ever seen that building? He said, no, I've never seen it. So the idea that it had inspired this potential kidnapping, that to me loses some traction.
Okay, interesting. Dr. Brucato, any thoughts on that?
Well, the whole thing is puzzling to me because first and foremost, I'm confused if too much is being made out of a reference to projects in the writing. There are 200 projects that are written about in this here. And I wonder if Katherine could tell us a little bit about if it's safe to assume, as I think is being assumed in the media, that the word project necessarily refers to an abduction or a killing.
It does not.
What does it mean? Oh.
He sent me a list of 55 projects that he considered serious attempts at criminal behavior. The majority of them were breaking and entering, putting surveillance on somebody so he'd name a project, like Project, Cookie was one. And 10 of those 55 were actual murders. And he marks those out on his list. But project really for him was he's kind of entertaining the possibility of following someone. And then if he decides to pick someone out, that becomes more serious. He might follow them. He might learn their routine. And then he might find out they have a dog and he doesn't want to go that way, or there are too many people in the home, or it's just not feasible. He doesn't have the right time period, etc. So a project is simply, this is a potential. I'm going to look into this. And then only 55 of those, according to what he gave to me, turned into things that he actively stalked on a regular basis and really targeted for some kind of criminal activity.
Interesting. Greg, what are your thoughts?
That's very useful. That's very helpful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great.
Yeah. I think I like the way Sherlock Holmes probably approached looking at cases, and how difficult sometimes it is for us not to put blinders on because we develop a theory. When I say Sherlock Holmes, it's Arthur Conan Doyle, of course, who's the author and who was also a medical physician. And what he emphasized in The Scandal in Bohemia is how important it is that we don't try to make our theories fit the facts, but rather the facts suit the theories. And there's a lot of theories that are going on out there. And by looking at one or two coincidences, I think we've got to be very careful not to make assumptions or presumptions as a result of those coincidences. As you know, Chris, when we look at crimes in Dr. Brucato, in the foundation, we look at it through an investigative model that we refer to as the 10 filters of profiling. We don't look at one or two things, and we recognize that each of these filters are interdependent in the analysis and assessment of a case, particularly when you're trying to link cases together. And victimology is one. The initial contact site is another. The crime scene itself, a disposal site is another filter. Physical injuries is another. We also look at sexual assault, whether or not there was sexual assault, what that entailed. We look at MO versus signature. We also look at the organized versus disorganized aspect of a crime scene and the behavior in which the offender commits his crime. We look at suspect information, and we look at suspect risk level. So when attempting to link cases together, we go through every one of these filters, if you will, see what the similarities are, if there is in fact any similarities. And then we look at the geography, where those crimes are being committed, and the time frame, or the temporal aspects of the crime. Now, that's not to suggest that we don't look at intuition, because as experts, we all have a sense of intuition that's developed over a period of time based upon the combination and totality of experience and training that we've had and education that we've had, as well as bringing together a group of experts, not one or two, but a group of experts from various fields to look at a case. And I think here we don't even have a skeleton to look at in terms of the details of the kinds of behavior that may have been engaged in, to compare to what we know about Mr. Rader and the other crimes that we know that he has committed based upon his confessions. The MO is different. We don't have any MO or signature as it relates to his behavior with the victim in this case, other than his approach. Most of his approaches were in residences, and as Katherine pointed out, he worked alone. He didn't work with anybody. Another thing is it's important, I think, to emphasize he wanted to take the credit when this was all over. He wanted to take the credit for everything that he confessed to, and he's got nothing to hide at this point based upon what he's done previously, not to disclose it now. Why change now midstream and withhold information that if he's not going to be held necessarily accountable for it, but take responsibility for it? And I think that's the offer that's out there.
So that leads me into the thought process about Dr. Ramsland, if you can give us some insight into how he really thinks and about his signature aspect of his particular crimes. Educate us on where he is even today. I mean, you just got off the phone with him. You said today. Obviously people are saying he's playing the system still. He's playing law enforcement. But really, him better than anybody. For 15 years, you talk to him regularly and visit him, and you've written the books about him. So help us understand that signature aspect and why that is so vital as folks look into these, additional circumstances that have presented themselves.
Well, Greg raises one good point that I keep raising with reporters who call me. Why wouldn't he confess to more? And he has himself said this to every single investigator who has come to see him. He has no consequences to put it out there. He's 78. He's not well. He knows that he could go out in a big splash of glory in his mind if he were to add to his total. He knows that. And he keeps saying, so why wouldn't I do that? And he says he will not confess to something he did not do. You might say, and some have, well, he's a serial killer, so he's a liar. Well, he's not a liar because much of what he told me corresponds with the facts. And I had the DA's collection of items. I also had a number of other things. I had the interrogation tapes, etc. So he doesn't always lie. Maybe he manipulates. Maybe he fabricates here and there. But his question is well placed. Why wouldn't I confess? When he was arrested, they thought he was definitely good for 7. He added 3 at the time. And
Interesting.
why, and in detail, and in the book, lots of detail. And all 10 of his crimes were heavily detailed in his notes. So these are the kinds of things you would look at with behavior. I know that there is one theory that he had one MO for Wichita and another MO for everything outside Wichita, which is an explanation of convenience. It's a really odd thing to say about a sexually compelled predator, because typically they're going to have that core sense of a ritual that they want to fulfill. And with him, it was bondage. And the way he approached people was the stalking and the voyeurism, and all of that was part of it. So why would he change his MO just because he's outside Wichita? I can't make any sense of that.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away.